It's Friday, December 15th, 2017. I am JTG, and this is my instant review of the latest Star Wars movie, The Last Jedi. And I will start out by saying, this is a spoiler, because I don't believe that you can ever really give a review without some spoilers. And second, I believe that this is my favorite Star Wars movie of all the mainline ones, as well as, the secondary one. I think has there been one or two? Rogue One. I guess that's the only secondary one that's happened so far. This had a lot of callbacks to some of the other Star Wars movies. It wasn't a perfect movie by any means, but it was definitely the best of the Star Wars movies. I would say probably one of the better movies I've seen in a long time. Let's just jump into it. I'll start with the one plot hole right at the beginning, and that was the rebels were being attacked, and there was what's called a dreadnought, and there was also a fleet of star destroyers. I think that's what they called smaller ships, but a dreadnought they called it a planet killer, or a rebel fleet killer, I believe it was. And it shows up and it starts bombarding the rebel base on the planet, and it starts shooting up the evacuating rebels. And the other ships are just sitting around going, we're just going to watch. And surprisingly enough, the commander of the fleet was not on the biggest ship, the dreadnought. I think that's another plot hole. Why wasn't he on the dreadnought? Why was he on one of the smaller ships? Because usually the admiral would be on one of the biggest and the fanciest ships. By the way, aside, I'm in the parking lot at Northridge Cinemas in Salinas. It's about, don't know what time exactly. It was started at 4:40. It was a fairly long movie, and it had several false endings, I guess you'd call it. But, and so one of the main characters, I think it was Poe. One of the characters. I don't have the characters' names down. One of the characters with the robot BB-8 went in and shot up all of the cannons that were on the anti-ship cannons that were on the big ship. And then a whole bunch of bombers came in. And they were all shot up except for one. And of course, it managed to drop its bombs and blow up the dreadnought. That's what it's called, dreadnought. And it just bomber seems to be a really strange thing for something in space, because you would think rockets, you'd have to have some kind of propulsive mechanism to drop bombs. I mean, bomber would be like for a place where you have gravity to pull it in, but these are just kind of inert, be more like mines perhaps. But I'm just tugging at the poor linguistics of it, I guess. So that was my first, and really the only significant thing that I can think of at the moment that bothered me was right off the bat, why are these other ships just sitting off while the dreadnought is getting blown up, and why weren't they shooting at the rebels, once they saw what was happening or after it happened? So it goes on. We find out Snoke buys it, so to speak. He gets killed by Kylo Ren, and it was, to me, more of a trick than it was. Well, it was a trick, not power, that he managed to kill him. He basically turned Kylo Ren's, he turned Snoke's own lightsaber against him by just turning it and turning towards when he wasn't watching and turned it on. And Snoke kept saying, "I know your thoughts," except that he obviously did not, because he didn't know what that was all about. And so that shows that maybe there was some power going on there, that Kylo Ren was managed to deceive Snoke at least long enough for him to cut him in half. And actually cut him into several pieces, because when the blade went through him, it not only cut him in half, it cut off one of his arms too. And I kept expecting him to I suppose there's a possibility Snoke is not dead, because, Darth Maul was cut in half and he didn't die. I mean, he came back in the Clone Wars animated series. And as far as I know, that's canon to the story. So maybe we'll see Snoke again in the next movie, or the movie after that, or sometime in the future. There were some interesting battles. I'm going to leap back and forth through the movie. This isn't in sequential order, but it was kind of the Death Star all over again, because they brought up this huge cannon. They said it was called I forget what they call it, something about a doorbuster, and the rebels were all hidey-hole had this huge heavy metal container or doorway, and they brought up this thing that was supposedly a gun based on the same technology as the Death Star, except not quite as powerful. It was something that they could move around. Now, the problem was, I thought once they fired it once and blasted through the door, surely all they needed to do was wait and recharge and fire again through the open hole to kill everybody inside. So why did they need to come in and try to invade? Luke is back. Well, was back. And so was Yoda. We saw Yoda and we saw Luke. And there was one line, Yoda had a good line, and I forget the exact line, was something along the lines of the true burden of a master is when you see your student exceed you. And that's kind of interesting as a student, or as a teacher. I think myself, it would be kind of nice to see one of my students someday exceed me. As I teach grade school, that probably won't happen for a while. Who knows, maybe I'll get into university or something else. Maybe I'll teach university someday. So, but that's an aside. I see Rey. I wish I could remember names. Finn. Finn was the black former stormtrooper. He was in the movie quite a bit, and he was working with this other character, an engineer, I believe, or maintenance person named Rose, who was kind of a technical, very proficient. I don't know if she was a genius. I didn't see enough to see if she was a genius. But at the end, she saved Finn from killing himself by essentially flying his ship into the mouth of the cannon. And she was really badly injured, but she was alive. It looked like she had a scene where it looked like she died, but apparently she just passed out. And so I hope this thing is recording, because there's something on here that says no sound. I hope that you're hearing me, not just seeing motionless lips. So anyway, and then at the end, Rey and Finn get together and they're all happy and snuggly, and I didn't remember that they had a relationship or potential relationship from the last movie. Maybe I should have gone to watch the last movie before I watched this one, because I only saw it once. I only saw it once in the theater, the same theater. This is probably the first movie in a long time that I want to see again. Well, I want to see Thor Ragnarok again. Don't really care to see Justice League. Well, I'll watch it when it comes out, and I can watch it online. I'm not going to watch it. I'm not going to go back to the theater for Justice League, but I think I will go back for both Ragnarok and this one, Last Jedi. So I'm thinking in the next movie there may be some plot twists between Rose and Finn and what's her, I sorry, my mind is not quite, I'm kind of tired too. So anyway, there could be some romance triangles going on there. And there were some kids shown. They were basically slaves, and they were supposed to be dealing with these kind of alien racing creatures. And at the end, they kept talking about how the rebellion will grow, and there's also going to be another trilogy. So I think this was a plot twist for the future, where this one boy is sweeping up this cage of the racing thing, and if you blink you'll miss it, but he reaches over and the broom flies up into his hand, not very far, only a few inches, but he doesn't grab it. The broom leaps into his hand, which tells me he's got force powers. And so who knows, maybe that kid will be the center of the next trilogy, or a major figure in the next trilogy, because this is episode 8. Episode 9 is going to conclude this trilogy. Luke is gone. Leia is still alive. That's something else. Carrie Fisher. There were a lot of scenes with Carrie Fisher, and I wonder how many of those scenes were filmed before she died, and how many of them were computer generated. And it's obvious to me that she's going to come back in the next movie. Although Poe is now the leader of the rebellion. Because at the end they were leaving the cavern and Flynn says, "Follow me!" And everyone turns to look at Leia, and Leia says, "What are you looking at me for? Follow him." So Leia will be in the next movie. I think she'll probably have a diminished role because she's, Carrie Fisher's dead. And unless they were really thinking far ahead, they I don't know, maybe they've already filmed some scenes for the episode 9 before she died. I mean, if I were making a trilogy, I'd try to do as many scenes as I could with the actors while I could. And then release them out over time. And it looked like for a while that we're going to see the two Force users get together, but that didn't happen. So I would say it's a movie I would recommend. It has a couple of little flaws, I think, and to me the biggest sticking point is why didn't the other ships get involved? And there were a couple other places where it just seemed they had the power to wipe out the rebels, but they just didn't do it. Oh, one other thing. There was this big plot point of there was just a few rebel ships left. And they were able to keep out of range of the missiles and the guns of the pursuing ship, which was Snoke's ship, which was actually bigger than the Dreadnought. And they kept shooting at it, and they were hitting, but they kept saying they were too far away to make an impact. They could shake the shields, but they weren't able to break through at that distance. Now, this is some kind of Star Wars physics, which isn't regular physics. Because in the real life, if they were accelerating away from the ship, and they were able to pull ahead, they would keep pulling ahead, and they would get further and further ahead until at some point they would be far enough away that, maybe they would, even that their rockets wouldn't even be able to target them, and perhaps they'd lose contact. They weren't able to jump to light speed because they had a tracker of some kind on board. So they needed to get away in a sense where they weren't being tracked. And there was a big plot point where they were trying to shut down the tracker, and that turned out to be a dead end because they ended up solving the whole solution of the movie, of the conflict, without needing to shut down the tracker. They did have one character commit suicide by taking a ship and going into light speed and shooting the ship going through light speed through Snoke's ship, which was so huge it didn't completely destroy it. So that'd be an interesting plot point. Was Snoke's ship destroyed? Snoke is dead at that point. Kylo Ren is going to be in charge now. He's the supreme leader. But the lead general also seems that he's none too happy with this, so I have a feeling that's going to be a plot point in the next movie where he might be trying to take out Kylo Ren somehow. Because Kylo Ren took out Snoke, who just demonstrated he just had awesome power. No one else could touch him. So it was basically just a trickery. Or hiding his real thoughts. He managed to hide his real thoughts from... Kylo Ren managed to hide his real thoughts from Snoke, which enabled him to essentially sneaky kill. Kylo Ren does not have nearly the power of Snoke. And that could be his undoing in the future. Whereas Rey has that power. She is at least as powerful, perhaps more so. Okay. I think that will do it for now. That's all.